Well, let's get started with this bullshit. What we got here? What do we have here? Donald Trump yelling about the Fed not cutting interest rates. Wonder why that is. Let's see. What do we got here? Preemptive cuts in interest rates are being called for by many, with energy costs way down, food prices, including Biden's egg disaster. He's still doing the fucking meme with like it's all Biden's fault that the avian flu happened, even though it was like a freak thing that just kind of happened under his administration. But it's Biden's fault. But sure, substantially lower, and most other things trending down. There's virtually no inflation. I mean, okay. So broadly speaking, from how I understand the Fed works, so basically the Fed is a separate institution that basically manages inflation. Like, that's like such a TLDR of like what the Fed is. So they're like the dudes who are responsible for printing a bunch more money. And obviously that's inflationary if you're printing a bunch more money, for treasury bonds and shit like that. So basically, the whole goal of the Fed is to always keep inflation at around 2%. But obviously with Trump's like idiotic fucking tariff bullshit, that's been inflationary pressures, right? Because, purchasing power of Americans has been, affected because products get more expensive, right? This is, basic economic stuff. But also, from what I understand, a big reason for as to why, like, the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency and is seen as rather stable is because of the existence of the Fed. What? I mean, like, Donald Trump is complaining about Jerome Powell, but Jerome Powell is like the dude that Donald Trump put in during his first term. It's whatever. So, interest rates, right? Basically, the Fed controls the interest rates for as to, like, who can, like, buy, like, U.S. Treasury bonds, and that's, like, made up of, like, a whole bunch of different stuff. 401ks, stocks, yada yada, the culmination of a bunch of different stuff. But also, like, it's about, like, the strength of just the U.S. dollar as, like, a currency, which is generally seen as very stable. So, bonds, generally a lot more stable, very low risk, but not very high return, which is why rich people don't really like them all that much. And, stocks, high risk, but very high potential for return. There's a reason why I say, like, I think basing the U.S. economy on basically a fucking gachapon machine that can just, like, make you lose trillions upon trillions of dollars just kind of on a whim might be a bad thing, but whatever. So Trump wants to cut the interest rates because with the interest rates being higher, it makes it such that rich people aren't going to buy U.S. Treasury bonds as much in order for them to gamble with on the stock market, because that's what they wanted to do, basically. If the interest rates are low, that causes inflationary pressures because a bunch more people are buying money, basically, which causes the fucking problems in the bond market, yada yada yada, and the U.S. economy would be more unstable. Again, keep in mind this also has to like play with a lot of Trump's tariffs. The only reason why he stopped his tariffs is because the bond markets, like, people were starting to sell like U.S. Treasury bonds. And broadly speaking, that's sort of seen as like a recession indicator because that means people are losing faith in the stability of the US dollar. Like, I think Japan sold a ton and they are the biggest holder of US Treasury bonds. So that's, generally speaking, pretty bad. So Trump wants to lower interest rates to spur on probably some growth within the stock market because it's shitting the bed. It is going down 5% in like the last 5 days. Today alone, it's lost about 2.5% because he keeps trying to do, very, very stupid shit with the economy. So this is like the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, similarly down as well. Because, like, all this talk about, like, wanting to fire Jerome Powell, who's been keeping this shit stable, is freaking out a bunch of investors, obviously, and also the Nasdaq is down. They're all the major like U.S. stocks. They're all down pretty significantly right now, and they've been going down cool, not like precipitously, but they've been very unstable and mostly in a downward trend recently. Because again, Mad King is gonna Mad King, and he's just gonna say a bunch of bullshit and try to get his way by, I don't know, being insane or some shit. Typical fucking Trump shit. So, also, it's not exactly accurate how the definition that I gave for the bonds. The bonds are basically just like an indicator of like the U.S. economy, broadly speaking, and the stocks are a representation of like every company that works within the U.S. Yada yada yada. That's what it is. And the bond market is typically like a representation of the strength of the U.S. dollar. There's a reason why it's the global reserve currency, because broadly speaking, people see the U.S. economy as generally being quite stable. Generally speaking. So, obviously, with the Mad King trying to do random fucking bullshit, like having idiotic screeds about Jerome Powell trying to make sure the economy doesn't shit itself because of his inflationary stuff, he's trying to make a stable market into something that's way more risky by bringing down the interest rates to zero, so then rich people can buy treasury bonds so they can fucking gamble with them. That's basically the whole plan, right? Because he wants these stock numbers to go back up. Because it's making him look bad on the economy. Which is one of the reasons why his poll numbers are starting to go down significantly. Because the economy is, like, shitting itself. So, where was I when I was reading this? There's virtually no inflation because of the Inflation Reduction Act. You had nothing to do with that. With these costs trending so nicely downward, just what I predicted they would do. Buddy, like, you're gonna fucking raise the price. The prices are gonna go up because the tariffs are still in place, right? What? The aluminum steel tariffs with, like, Canada, they're in place, right? 25% tariffs, and I think the global 10% tariffs on everyone is also in place. And I think he also has his tariffs on China in place as well, but, like, certain things are exempt from China. It's a fucking complete shit show, from what I understand. Like, all electronic equipment are exempt. But, like, wasn't there, like, a pretty big deal recently with Australia and China, right? Like, China used to import a lot of beef from America, and now they went to Australia to be like, yeah, we want to import beef from you guys, and they came to, like, an agreement saying, like, oh yeah, sure, fuck it, Tariff war halts U.S. beef exports to China as Australia fills the gap. Yep. I mean, a lot of excellent gambit, sir. This is going exactly as intended. A top G, the art of doing nothing and shit like that. So yeah, China just made a deal with Australia to get beef from them instead of the U.S. because of this fucking dumbass tariff war. Because obviously, makes perfect sense to me. Like, cause like, why the fuck would China want to buy a bunch of like extra expensive beef when it's just like, okay, we'll just go talk with other people. We'll just get beef from Australia. Fuck it, whatever. Whereas, this dumbass is like alienating Australia from the U.S. because of his dumb fuck global tariffs, but whatever. Stupid. There can almost be no inflation, but there can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser. So that's in reference to Jerome Powell, who's not going to lower the interest rates because, again, the only reason why Trump wants the interest rates lowered is so he can have all of his fucking rich billionaire buddies buy the bond market to try to buy bonds from the bond market, which is going to cause problems there. It'll make the bond market yields worse, and really potentially cause a fucking recession. More worse than it potentially is. So he can shore up these numbers. That's why he's saying these things. So, is he really going to try to fucking, like, force Jerome Powell or, like, threaten Jerome Powell with a firing? As far as I can tell, the legal sort of, like, precedent of that is, I don't know if it's dubious is correct to say, but he can't do that, right? Because the idea of like the Fed being a separate sort of entity that's not affected by any of the fucking other branches, being a contributing factor to the fact that the U.S. is probably U.S. dollar is broadly seen as a very stable currency, which you can trade with. So, like, if the executive, especially a mad king like Trump, can just fire and put in, like, some loyalists all willy-nilly, a lot of people would not have much confidence within the U.S. economy and would probably be selling their fucking treasury bonds like it's a fucking fire sale. It would not be good for the U.S. It'd be a complete fucking shit show. But, you know, what do we got here? Europe has already lowered 7 times. Powell has always been too late, except when it comes to the election period where he lowered in order to help sleepy Joe Biden, later Kamala, get elected. How did that work out? We're slipping in like 2020 election fucking conspiracism. You know, because he's still mad about that shit. I mean, bro, you lost 2020 because of fucking COVID. Your handling of the pandemic was a complete fucking disaster. Because you were just like, whatever, who cares? Let the poorest die, I don't fucking give a shit about them. Fuck it. And, he didn't, like, was it to help, like, Kamala Harris fucking try to win the election? Like, buddy, Jerome Powell is the guy you fucking appointed as Fed chair. Like, he wasn't trying to help anyone win. He's, well, like, neutral or, like, bipartisan. Like, the Fed shouldn't have, like, a particular partisan leaning, because if it has a fucking partisan leaning, that could potentially cause a lot of fucking problems. And, again, like I said before, if people think that the U.S. economy is unstable, that's going to make the economy within the U.S. go, well, into more of a free fall. Because, again, we all know why he wants to lower the fucking interest rates. He wants to shore up these fucking dumbass numbers because he's starting to lose in terms of the economy, and his poll numbers are going down in the fucking shitter. That's why. So he wants to try to fire and get rid of Jerome Powell as a result. I mean, it's just silly. And like, if like a fucking he puts in like a crony or some shit, like what is that going to accomplish? It's going to make it go further into potential free fall. And then guess what? Instead of like a recession, we might get a fucking depression. So, you know, I wonder if this is all part of the sort of plan that I've said before. Like, he wants there to inherently be a fucking recession. So then, like, whatever billionaire buddies he has in, like, private equity in the tech sector can, like, gobble up a bunch of smaller companies, you know, strip them for parts and then sell them off. So they can make an absolute killing and just have normal people suffer as a result. Honestly, I think that's still probably the case. Because, like, does Donald Trump care about the average American? No, he doesn't give a fuck about them, to be honest. You know, and, you know, more and more people, given how his polling numbers are going, like, are realizing that. So, really, there's nothing else to say besides, like, the only reason why he's doing this is because, well, he wants you, broadly speaking, to suffer and for the billionaires to have, well, more and more wealth and power under their control, broadly speaking. There's really not much else to say about this besides Trump and the Republicans just want, well, average people to fucking suffer, broadly speaking.